All right. So today, our panel session is really looking at the human resources needed to meet the 2030 plan. Um, and I suppose the first thing is really just looking at what that plan is. Um, Indian Railways prepared a national rail plan for India, 2030. The plan is to create a future-ready rail system by 2030. It's aimed to formulate strategies based both on operational capacities and commercial policy initiatives to increase the modal share of railways in freight to 45%. So under this plan, there's a huge input to be made into developing infrastructure, railways, identifying high-speed corridors, dedicated freight routes, additional locomotive requirements, etc. So I suppose what we really wanted to discuss today is how is that going to be met? And so I suppose the first thing I would like is just to ask each of the panelists to give their comments on essentially that plan and what they see are the issues. So, Mr. Sunil, if I start with you.
Thank you, David. Yes, the plan is ambitious in every way, and it's a good plan in terms of the expectations and the outcomes which are expected out of it. Unfortunately, while the plan gets into detail of the physical infrastructure and the physical projects it just glosses over the side that where are the resources going to come from to implement this plan. That is a big lacuna in the plan, and nobody seems to have really gone in depth, because such a large plan cannot be handled by the current number of resources, both in the Indian Railways and outside. Because as far as my reading of the industry goes over these past 25, 30 years, while Indian Railway has a large number of staff, there is an equally large requirement outside the Indian Railways in terms of the contractors, the manufacturers, the consultants who would help the Indian Railway in implementing this plan. And that resource is seemed to have overlooked by the industry. Of course, it's not the railway's job to look at that, but then I'm sure as a stakeholder, they need to look at that aspect, because otherwise the project would fail, which is what is happening today to the Indian Railways. The projects get delayed, not necessarily for lack of funds, not necessarily for lack of the product resources, but it's because the contractors do not have the right manpower, or do not have the kind of qualified manpower or the requisite number of manpower to implement a project. And that is, to me, a very key requirement which needs to be looked at if this plan has to be a success. Over to you, David.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Sajid, could you make a comment as well?
Sure. So glad to be here. So I look at this as an opportunity. And let me start by saying that one number that has stuck with me is that India would be about expecting to be 40% share of railway activity in the world. Whether the number is 40 or 35, but what it means is it's a significant about activity that will happen, and it has various aspects to it. The way I look at it as an opportunity is India is also a country which has more than 1 billion people looking for jobs. And what would eventually happen is that from the country itself, we will have to leverage the education system that exists to tailor-made few of the resources that are there in terms of getting ready for different aspects of railway activity. It could include signaling, it would include anti-collision devices, include digital products, and it would include traditional roles that are there. And I personally feel as a Wabtec as a company, we had done an ambitious part of hiring 80% of the people, not from the market. We have hired from the pyramid that we have, which is engineering colleges, diploma engineering colleges, and we had to train, which means effort and having infrastructure. But I look at it as a great opportunity that the rest of the industry is also doing something similar that we are doing. So I see it as a very, very positive challenge to deal with, David and Sunil.
True.
Okay. Yeah, I think from what everything you're saying is quite correct. It's the problem you've got is that you're part of a world system, and the demand at the moment is huge in the whole of the Middle East, Asia, India. No, China has it as well, but China is self-sufficient. China doesn't really look outside of China, and maybe the model that they used is a good one in that they started more than 20 years ago with colleges and universities focusing on railways and developed the people. And you have the same thing has happened in Asia, where they started off by bringing in people, but now places like Hong Kong, completely self-sufficient. Malaysia, really self-sufficient in terms of being able to find the people they need for their projects. But then, of course, they also become the targets for other countries that haven't perhaps put the effort in, who will then go to India or to Malaysia to find the people they need for their projects. And that's another factor. One of the questions I'd ask you both is it's interesting what you were just saying then in terms of taking people from the universities and training them. I know a big factor in Australia has been that you're competing with other industries, and it's how you make railways attractive to the young engineers so that they see a career in railways over a career in other industries or in IT or in other areas. And I guess that takes a lot of effort on the part of both the companies, but also on the government to make people aware of how the technology is really at a very high level in a rail system, and therefore it's a place that people want to be, because you've really got to, as you said, you've got to get the people to do these plans. It's very good to say we're going to do it all by 2030, but unless you started 10 years ago trying to train up the people, it's very difficult, particularly if you're looking at a massive increase in the resource requirements. And I just look at the plans for the dedicated freight route, the high-speed line, they're all new, plus the metros. The number of metros that are being built and planned to be built in India over the next 10 years, it's staggering. China did it, so it can be done, but China did it because it actually started 20 years before getting the resources in place, so they didn't have to rely on anybody else. I guess the problem you've got is India in that situation now? Has the training been done? Have the universities been focusing on providing the people? Is the industry able to get the people it needs and train them up? Have you got any comments on that?
Okay, so let me start. So first thing I would say is that there is work to be done, but I'll tell you some green shoots that are there. Indian Railways, being the biggest player in the rail industry in India, took an ambitious step of having a railway university set up in Baroda, which existed, but it now is a university with programs in engineering to masters, including an MBA program on different stream. But that's one example. Beyond that, I think there's a huge amount of work that all of us have to do, including the industry, uh, people like Sunil and people like in the railways, in terms of positioning railways as a technology player. Let me explain that to you. Very recently, we are executing a project on online monitoring of rolling stock. Right? It's a technology play where we need engineers and need people who are interested to look at this, not just in terms of execution of project, but as we get into anti-collision for 37,000 kilometers, we need both products, technology, and positioning in institutes of eminence, but also institutes which are at state level. So I do feel we are taking baby steps today, but the fact that this plan is out and there's so much of investment that will happen, I do feel like other industries like telecom, which had baby steps, and then we will have an opportunity, and it's a great thing for all of people who are related to the topic of training, uh, I would say topic of branding railways in terms of going out there in universities and not just hiring. Just
No.
yesterday, I got a call of engaging as a knowledge partner in building the curriculum with one of the IITs we have for not IITs but for diploma engineering colleges, which are really the 3-year colleges. Why I'm sharing this story is I didn't see this happen a few years ago, and this is not just one example. This is happening in multiple states. So a very structured approach, not by individual companies, but really, I would say a forum, whether it is the industry forum or it could be people like Sunil, myself, interacting with other HR leaders would really help and take it forward.
Yeah. Sunil, have you got any comment?
Yeah, I agree with what Sajid has said. That yes, in fact, I'm really happy with the way Wabtec has actually invested in people and grown their own internal team, which is a very encouraging sign, both for the youngsters to look at a career in the railways, which is what I do. I've personally visited over 2 dozen colleges where I actually give a talk on global careers in the railway, because like you rightly said, yes, normally the comparison for engineering students is that if my colleague is taking an IT job versus I go for a railway kind of a career, which is more glamorous, so to say. So that's where we try to get in and explain to students, which is what Sajid said, that there's technology or maybe higher end of technology actually, which students are not aware of. Signaling systems today, locomotives today are as good as a rocket or an aeroplane today. So technology is at play. So it's not that they are all unglamorous or it's only sight, dirt and grime kind of thing. No, railways can also be that. So that's something which we are doing. But again, I agree with Sajid that more needs to be done. And unfortunately, there is no common industry association for the railways in India, where manufacturers, consultants, trainers, everybody could talk together. So maybe it's like, at a smaller level, people like Sajid and me will have to increase this kind of the talk or talk about this in various forums, so that more and more people join this opportunity. And for students, I feel this is exactly, again, could be a good boom for as a career. It's yes, IT is definitely a big thing in India, but I feel railways also can give a huge career path. When I look at the numbers, and what David said is true, that a lot of Indians are actually sought after outside of India. In fact, I know of at least 200-300 people who are in my network, who've done their initial work in India and now are working for global companies outside of India and doing a good job of it. So there is this possibility of Indian students actually making a good career, provided there is this opportunity given to them, there is this training. So all in all, what I do agree with, again, what Sajid said, these are good times to be in. Yes, there would be struggle initially, but then when the boom happens over a period of time, which is what I am very optimistic about, it will be good for both the students as an alternate career. For the industry, they will be able to get bright students into the campuses, from the campuses to themselves, and for trainers alike. So I think all three. But then yes, we need to plan out. We need to look at how we can work together to make this happen. So that's my take on this particular aspect, David.
Okay, so if you go to the question that we're addressing, it's are the human is the human in fact human is the human resources ready for the plan? I mean, what you're talking about is things that are being done, but has enough been done?
No,
And
a very strong no to that.
and I think that's probably the biggest issue, isn't it? That you can come up with, and I think you look at what's being done, it's almost like a reaction. Population is growing at an enormous pace. Congestion is bad. We'll put in metros. That's wonderful, but where are you going to get the people to build all of these resources? I mean, in terms of the technical resources, and you really have to rely on resources within India. You can't. You're not. It's not possible to import what you want.
Absolutely.
So it is a matter of growing them, and as you said, training them. I think the other point you raise is a very good one. If I take Australia as an example, much smaller size in terms of population or in terms of the industry, but the Australian Railroad Association was formed probably 10, 15 years ago. And that brings together manufacturers, suppliers, railways, consultants into a one forum as a lobby group.
True.
And also and it's worked very hard to shift the emphasis away from roads and onto rail. And I've been to 2 conferences in the last 3 months. The first one's for 2 years, where people got together, and unfortunately, in one case, most people end up catching COVID out of it. But they all said it was worthwhile to get together. But the situation was very much, there's been a turning point in terms of not only here but everywhere in the world, that governments have suddenly realized that the answer to the problem is mass transit. It's not building more roads. It's actually providing public transport systems or increasing your freight corridors to allow the freight to be moved faster. And so I think, as Sunil, you said at the very beginning, the plan is a good one. It's just a matter of whether it could be done without doing these other things. It's probably not possible. It's a huge factor, and I guess Wabtec as a company realizes they can win the work, but they've got to be able to do the work. Therefore, they've got to get the resources. So you're back to square one, and if you don't go and get the people and train them, you won't be able to do it in the long term. And I think you see Wabtec I think you see most of the major manufacturers have taken that view over the last 5-10 years, and they see they've got to do it. Originally, it was the railways. When I went through as a graduate, the railways, British Rail, Australian Railways, used to train up engineers, pay you to go to university, then you were bonded for 5 years or something, but it didn't matter. By then you'd actually had it in your system. And most people who join a railway stay with the railways forever. So if you get them, if you can get people to come in early, you've probably got them for life. It's very unusual for someone to suddenly leave, because they do see, as you both said, the technology is top of the class. It's what's being done in high speed, in metros, in heavy freight railways around the world is fantastic. You see the trains in the Pilbara of sort of 10 kilometers long, no driver, fully automated, moving to much more energy efficient in terms of using regenerative braking to provide the power they need. So all of those things are way ahead of what's going on everywhere else, so in other industries. So yeah, it's a case of what can be done in the short term, I guess, is really the factor, isn't it? The government has set the plan, and as you said, it's not the money that's needed; it's the resources to do the work. What are the other factors though that impinge that, make it more difficult? Do you see in terms of getting the resources you need to do the work? There are other issues that you see that need to be addressed. Education is one, getting people in at an early stage and training them up within but is there incentives from the government to businesses to do that? Or is that something that should be done?
Yeah, I think one of the issues which sort of impedes this is what I've seen globally. There is no certification available for trade in India, in the railway form. So that if it's like what Sajid, for example, they've recruited somebody, they've trained him. Now, technically speaking, outside of their company, he's still just a mechanic or whatever it is, because he doesn't have the trade certificate issued by an independent certification agency that he's fit for a railway mechanic's job and could or get a job elsewhere also. Now, that is one of the issues, especially at the lower level, where there is no independent certification concept itself is non-existent in India, which is very popular in most of the European countries. So there people don't go for a conventional degree or a diploma qualification. It's not necessary. Whereas here everybody would ask First thing is, are you a graduate engineer? Or are you a graduate so and so, and then what kind of experience you have. But then if you had trade certifications, you could actually get a lot more people who are just out of school or just out of the basic diploma and are jobless today. You could actually offer them jobs because of that certification. They could start off at a lowest level, but then they keep on adding to their certification, like how you have City and Guilds has great certification for the UK, and that could help them grow in the industry. Plus also help the industry in getting better and better trained certified people, so they are sure that this person actually fits the role which they are looking at. So that is something which is totally non-existent. And similarly, the other issue is a collective fora for everybody to discuss the issues in terms of shortages or in terms of problems or bottlenecks. There is no independent, common fora like the Rail Industry Association of the UK or the Australian Railway Association. There is no similar association here, a trade body for railway stakeholders, so that so that each of us can actually come forward and discuss issues, and then I'm sure solutions will come out. But today, since there is everybody is kind of having a problem, but they're keeping it to themselves. Because frankly, if you look at it now, Sajid or Wabtec should not be spending as much time on training as, because locomotive manufacture or other technology is their job. Training is not their job. It should be left to institutes like ours or trainers to actually offer them that. But then that can happen only when the industry is talking to potential trainers and looking at what is required for the industry, looking at what is required from the training aspect, how it can be improved, and how the overall, like what Sajid said, the curriculum can be built to suit the industry, not just to suit a particular broad-based certification or just a degree or a diploma, but to suit the industry. I think that is the other issue where the government should take serious steps in getting these players together, or the Indian Railways should take steps that, yes, why not have all of them together, talk together, because eventually if the other stakeholders fail, the Indian Railways plans fail. Like I told you, Indian Railway is dependent on the other stakeholders equally, or rather much more, to implement these plans. So unless the other stakeholders perform, the plans will always be delayed. They will get stuck. So that to me is a big issue again. Sajid, your points on this?
Yeah, I would actually point out to you and Sunil is that the reputation of railways as a player where you have use of technology is happening. That story is not out there. So the impediment is it is seen as a laid back sector versus a sector which needs technology for safety, for efficiency. And a good example is at our Bangalore Technology Center. I visited along with our president for digital electronics recently, where the team is working on a Brazil project where the tracks get flooded. And similar to the example you gave in Australia, they're working on a software where they, for 1.5 kilometers, they would actually run the train without driverless. So the driver would get down and then it would move, and it's an iron ore site as well further down. Now, this project, if people like all of us should share more that these kind of challenges are out there, which internally a railway engineer works on. And it's not just about hardware and software. You can use machine learning, you could use sensors, you can use so many things to find a solution. Is the story out there? The answer is no. Maybe Australia and Brazil have mining sectors with biggest players where they're experimenting more.
No, I think what you're talking about is a common problem. I think at the recent conference, Ausrail conference here, it was very clear from a number of the speakers, and particularly from a lot of the younger engineers that were talking, that a lot more has got to be put into lifting the image, improving the image. And I suppose that's a big, that just takes time, and Sunil's correct. The problem you've got is you as a company do the training because otherwise you can't provide the resources, but you're actually training them for the industry. So I wonder how you go in terms of keeping those staff. If you do such a good job of training, they become very valuable to someone else who didn't put any money into it and can therefore reap the benefits of your efforts. So how do you address that issue in terms of training people and retaining staff? Is that an issue for you?
Absolutely. It's a big issue. And look, uh, what we do is it's a subject in itself. There may be four things to be done. But the biggest thing that drives people is that they should have a connection with the work they do, which they may feel meaningful, or
Yes.
they see the company has a soul or a purpose, right? A company meaning the organization. And I'm
Yes.
not going to talk about VAPTech here. I'm going to talk about Indian Railways. This large government setup has a big soul. It runs hospitals, it runs schools, you can name it what it runs. And I have friends who have grown up in colonies where the parents work with railways. It's a huge association. So for us in the industry, the biggest good example is Indian Railways
Right.
on what they do. And even if we do 10% of what Indian Railways has done, it will be remarkable.
Yeah.
So, and I want to share with an example here that it is the social aspect. Indian Railways is not just for profit. It's something that touches all of us, even in the industry.
Yes.
And we could we could benchmark Indian Railways first of what they do, and then we have some nice things industry wise as well. But going back, David, there is an interesting concept of CSR, which is what do you do for the community by the law, and we as VAPTech do a lot, even when it is not something that was complied to us because you have to wait for 3 years in terms of what training programs and trading programs for community, specifically for the Bihar factory, and in Shah Jahanpur we have the Rosa establishment. So the big example is Indian Railways for us of a company with a soul. And I think those are the things that help people to stay in the company beyond the culture aspect.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I can very well sort of empathize with what Sajid has said, because I am a third generation railwayman. So yes, so my family has been so deeply connected with the Indian Railways. What you rightly said, I've grown up in a railway colony. So was my father. My grandfather was in the railways. So yes, so to me, railway is a commitment. The reason, frankly, we set up the Institute for Training was more out of passion rather than commercial intent. The whole idea was that, yes, what is it that we can give back to the industry? And that's how, though 10 years ago when we started it, it was not that, it was a visible business model. But then the idea was that, yes, if we can train and give back to the industry, people who want to be trained and are not in the Indian Railways. So that was the whole idea, and that is still our whole kind of reason for survival as such. We are passionate about creating good employees for the railway industry as a whole, not necessarily Indian Railways, because we feel that, yes, railway is not really, like you said, the soul of railway is not really exposed. A common man, while traveling in a train, is happy, but then he doesn't know the other parts of the railway system. He's happy to be a passenger only. So that is something which we want to bring about. And yes, there are certain things which could help this happen. For example, again, Sajid, you've recruited maybe 400 or 800 people, but then this is not spoken about. Whereas when a TCS or a Infosys says I'm planning to recruit 5,000, it suddenly becomes news. So what happens is a youngster suddenly knows that there are so many opportunities. Whereas today, the Indian Railway recruitment is the only one. Nobody talks of, say, VAPTech planning 5,000 people over next 10 years, or say Alstom planning 5,000 people, or that's not, because if collectively, if you look at it, this would also be 5 lakh jobs in next 10 years. But then
Yes.
that doesn't become news. So that is where there is that diffidence in youngsters, that is this a career where I can grow? Is this something for me? So he looks at railway career only from the Indian Railways point of view. which is very difficult to get in because it's through that Railway Recruitment Board or the UPSC exam. But then again, I repeatedly tell people when I'm talking to college students that outside of the Indian Railway, there is a much bigger opportunity, much bigger growth opportunities, and more play there. You can actually get very fast hands-on training, exposure to technology. You could do that, but that doesn't become news, unfortunately. So that is something collectively we need to do. We need to actually be in the news there more often as a group of people for the sake of the industry, because everybody would benefit. You'll have people actually queuing up and saying, Webtech, I need a job with you, kind of. Or, youngsters actually applying directly that, oh my God, I didn't know you were planning of recruiting 500 people over next 1 year or 2 years. And it will also help trainers like us. If we have an idea that over a period of time, you are looking at 5,000 people over 10 years. It's not a commitment, but then there is some idea. So when we also plan our curriculum or different courses, it gives us an idea that yes, this is where the industry is going for. So this is something which we can do. So I think these are some of the things which we can collectively do. That this is not so-called, I would say, advertising, but more being in the press, being social media today, and this is where the youngsters today look for. Unfortunately, they rarely need newspapers, but then they are more social media active. So if these kind of news is given around, because I always say, Webtech has done excellent work, but the student community doesn't know that, excepting the corporate community and maybe the community within your geographical area. But if others get to know, then they would say, oh my, I've seen a Webtech board in Bangalore. Why not apply there? I've seen a Webtech board in Coimbatore, so why not apply there, kind of thing. They would automatically, then once the tipping point comes in, then I'm sure it will benefit everybody in the industry. And that's what I'm hoping for, that it would happen sooner than later.
And Sunil, maybe this forum is also a forum which express the views. Over to you, David.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're saying is right. I mean, but the actual additional training that's being developed and provided, that's only really been in the last 5 years? Was it? I mean, the initiatives you're talking about, Sunil, I thought really a lot of this has only been coming out over less than 10 years.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
So, and how much is being done? What has to be done? If you look at this plan, it's very ambitious, but how much input was in by the industry and how much of it was just from within the ministry? Because it seems as if, as you've both said, it's going to be difficult to resource what's needed. Forget about the additional cost of material and all the supply problems because of COVID and everything else. But the resourcing, it's possible, right? To take an engineer from an engineering university and train him to be able to do signaling design. I would have thought it's 3 years, 4 years, then mentoring through a business where he can get that experience, which might be in Indian Railways, but it probably more likely to be within one of the industry providers who are actually looking at it on a worldwide basis in terms of developing that technology. Is that right? We're talking 3-4 years from the time of graduate.
Yes.
So, and this seems to be. So that says that if you actually put the money into it, into the education, more into education and training, then within 10 years, you could be quite strong in terms of the resourcing that you need, the technology resourcing. And coupled with that, I'd be interested in your thoughts, Sajid, in terms of people are now, because of COVID, there is more people working from home than ever, and more consultancies rubbing their hands together and saying, we no longer have to put these people into expensive places like the UK or the US or Australia. They could be in India or Malaysia, where labor costs are a third or a quarter of what they are, and we can do the work there and just do it for the clients anywhere in the world. So that there is an opportunity for India. It already is there, right? It's signaling design.
Yeah.
Most of the signaling design work is being done in India now, has been for a long time. But there's probably scope for a lot of the technology development and research to be done in India itself. which
Yep.
means putting more money into research, more money into research and development, and more money into training. Now, is that, I didn't see in all the talk about the National Rail Plan anything talking about providing that training, providing the money for R&D in order to achieve the objectives, and sustain the business in the long term. Did I miss something, or is it not there?
So look, this aspect of COVID is also, we have to acknowledge it's a recent one that prompted, like you talked about, the tipping point of what work can be done remotely or closer to the client. Because there are three, I look at it as three things. One is some jobs cannot be done remotely. A factory being run has to be run with everyone there. The second aspect is the signaling example, which is the other extreme, can be done remotely. And there's a third aspect, which I can put the names of project managers, let's say, who you could be remote for a couple of days, but you will be at the site for a couple of days and a week to see the execution. It's a mixed model. Now, David, I do think we have to think broader than the plan, whether it's there or not. This is something which is a dynamics of the market, not only in the railway industry, but a broader one. And what you're seeing is whether it's banking or it is aviation or railways, we will see new models come up irrespective of the sector we belong to. The reaction to the model is what we should talk about. And I think the industry is embracing that in the same way like any other industry. We are still gathering our foot of for jobs which were completely done on site, can we have a mixed model or extreme of remote? You bring up the example, the engineering, technology, IT, India being one of the capitals of the world, we are seeing that happen, David, quite a lot, right? And the mixed model is something that we will see emerging in next few months because they're still at the on-site piece. It will shift in the middle. I'm just giving you a very crisp answer so that we are to the point.
No, what you said, Sajid, I agree with you. The models are emerging now because of the sheer necessity. So I think, yes, we need to keep a track on that as to what is the best way to do it, because I'm sure everybody would like to use the maximum, get a maximum impact from the resources. So it is happening in certain projects where what Sajid said that, yes, partly on site and bulk of the work off site, so that you're still hands-on, but at the same time, you're able to actually go back home with restricted travel and continue with the project. We've seen some of that happen in India also on some of the key projects, some of the metros, for example, where the consultants were allowed to work from home and literally have meetings every day, but then bulk of the work, almost 80 or 90% of the work, because it was more design review rather than supervision at that point of time. So yes, they could continue that. So clients are also evolving, looking at the situation, but still there is no formal framework as yet. But then again, we need to be open to ideas from all aspects and see whatever best works going forward, and whatever is suitable for the plan. We need to be up there. Maybe railway as an industry historically has been a little laid back or conservative. So as an industry, we need to be more aware of using technology to the maximum. That is something which I think collectively railway people all over. I think globally, my experiences, I've dealt with maybe railways in 25 countries, and everywhere I find railway is the most conservative of the industries in those countries. So that I think is the challenge. That yes, how to give that confidence to the the railway people in general. That yes, technology can be used as effectively as in fact maybe better, more effectively than the conventional way of working. So that's something which I think all of us need to be thinking about.
Right. Okay. Right. So if we look at any other, what are the other factors you think? Training we've hit on as being very important. Try to get the youth attractive, make it more attractive. The need for a consolidated industry. I mean, they seem to be all factors that can help in terms of promoting both the industry, but also the solutions to achieve achieve the National Rail Plan. I suppose if we look at that, then it's a case of it can be done. It just needs, I suppose, the incentives have got to be there. I mean, training works if people want it and they're willing to pay for it. So again, what incentives do you think are needed from government in order to do that, or do you think it's that employers just see it's a necessity and will just do it, and therefore it's up to service providers to provide that training?
Okay, here I would like to give you an example which we are currently handling of a so-called developing or an underdeveloped country like Nigeria. Now, Nigeria is planning to invest a fair amount of money on railway systems going forward. And they have actually started the technical education. We've helped them develop a curriculum and part of their technical 3-year technical education course. So we've helped them develop a railway curriculum. And today we are actually training the trainers of those the polytechnics in Nigeria. We've already done a batch pre-COVID of about 15 people. Unfortunately, because of COVID, they couldn't come, but then they're coming in again next month. So they've identified about 10 different polytechnics all over Nigeria, which would be having these railway courses, and they've identified about 100 faculty from those, professors, lecturers, some of them with 20, 25 years of experience in civil engineering and electrical engineering. They come here for a 70-day program and go back and are now the teachers of those polytechnics. So that is how, if Nigeria can do it, I see no reason why Indian government can't do it. You know, all it needs is a plan, a vision, and some amount of kind of desire to actually make it happen. And in 2 to 3 years' time, for the National Railway Plan, actually the resources can be ready. Yesterday would have been ideal, but today is not too late, is what I would say. Today is still the right time.
So all of the things you're talking about needs a body that represents the suppliers, the railways, to actually represent the industry to government and try and get the changes you're talking about, isn't it? That would seem to be key to this whole discussion.
Yes.
So the way to get the human resources ready for this plan is education and training, and also, I suppose, as you say, development of the industry as a place to work, somewhere really you want it to become the preferred option, rather than, for me, when I went through, I just looked at who was paying the most money for the cadetship, and that I chose rail because they were paying more than anyone else. Was very fortunate because I stayed with it forever. But that was the way it was decided, and I suppose it was because then, you know, I look at the railways in Sydney now compared to what they were 20 years ago or 30 years ago. I'm sure you have the same. It's changed a lot. It's now become a place people want to work, and that's still not there, but people see it as an efficient public transport system, and that's probably what's going to happen in India, because of the difference is that the images you see of Indian railways of people hanging off trains is not a good image. But you look at the Delhi Metro, you look at the metros being built, that's a whole new ball game, isn't it? It's a modern mass transit system that everybody wants to ride on. So it's lifting the image. And I think dedicated freight route and high speed line, same thing. They're lifting the image of the rail as a potential employer. So yeah, I think we take it from there. Now, I'm not quite sure where we're up to with time.
Need to wrap up now. I guess the closing comments from each one of you, and we can next 5 minutes we can wrap.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go from there. Let's start, Sunil. You're in the left-hand corner up there. So
yeah,
in
I
blue,
think to sum up, if I have to put some couple of points to sum up, one is, yes, we need to get youngsters interested in a career in the railways. The second is we need to collectively, the industry, trainers, and every stakeholder has to collectively talk to each other and see what are the gaps, and then I'm sure we would be able to fill it up. The third is, yes, a lot more companies like Wabtec has to have to come forward and take the initiative there, which they've already done remarkable work. Something like that, something more like that has to happen. These are the 3 or 4 key points which I feel will be needed to be done if we have to make the National Rail Plan a success.
All right. And yourself?
Yep. So look, as we wrap up, I would say, good discussion. I feel that as far as the rail plan and readiness is concerned, though individual companies would take steps in terms of training, I do feel that uh, it's a stool with 3 pillars, right? So the first one, it would be the industry tying up closely with technical uh, partners or training partners. And the third place is railways, because it's run by the government, playing a role in terms of either setting a forum. David, I do feel that I personally am not a strong proponent of looking at incentives for the government. It's a big play for companies like us, Waptec, to do their bit, even if it is to create a talent pool for the market. And we are proud if some of our employees are being tapped by our competitor, which is happening, because that means we have hired good quality people and trained them.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I guess I was only asking the question about incentives because there is a cost to doing what you're doing, but then the result is you get happy employees, and as long as you're retaining most of them, then it's been worthwhile. But if you take the view as you suggested, it's for the good of the industry, then you're right. It's that's always been the attitude of the rail system, right? I assume it's the attitude of Indian Railways. If they can train the people up to that they're poached by people like Webtech, then they've done the right thing. And that's a way of incentivizing the companies to do it. But the other thing is I just did, from my experience in trying to recruit for projects in India, just trust the person you put up for a senior position. You've got to be able to get documented proof going back 20 years is out of line with the rest of the world. It just makes it difficult. And I also find the approval process on dedicated freight route and major projects is just horrendous. Months and months go by trying to get approval for someone, where if they're not going to work out, they're not going to last. So you can replace them. So rather than delay a project, get the decision process needs to be sped up. I assume it's the same with all contracts. It just seems to be a long time taken to get things done. But I think the key elements of what you both talked about is the industry as a whole needs to work together for the good of the industry, and also help government achieve their objectives. As you say, the National Rail Plan is a good plan.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do it, there needs to be input on how to do it. How do you achieve that? And it might mean a slow start, but able to achieve the objectives by the 2030 that they've set down. All right. So thank you both, and I'll hand it back. Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you, David, and nice having you as a co-panelist, Sajid. Thank you very much.
Same here.
Nice to talk to you both.
How the time went by, we couldn't think.